Part 2 of this week's lecture involves practice and policy considerations for working with the abusive adult partners in both male to female intimate partner violence and female to male intimate partner violence. So we're looking in these next few slides at some considerations in working with the batterers or the abusers in the adult relationships. We start looking first at issues involving male to female intimate partner violence, and the fact is that both abusive men and the abused women in the relationships oftentimes want to save their relationship, and this is one of the reasons why I think it's important to consider that we work with batterers. We must work with batterers if we're going to resolve the issue of family violence. But beyond that consideration, if they are to reunify at some point, and there is a process that most people these days would recommend for this, that the batterer get out of the home, go through what I'm familiar with at least is batterer's intervention is considered to be the state of the art, and we're going to talk in a few slides about how that's really subject to debate, but the batterer go through the batterer intervention program. The victim work through her issues in individual counseling, and the folks working in the batterer intervention program also checks with the victim to make sure safety checks and to see how she's doing. And at the time when the victim's therapist believes that she is ready to start reintegrating with the batterer after the batterer has completed successfully the batterer intervention program, which is a pretty lengthy program, usually a year or more long, weekly meetings. Then there may be a time to look at couples counseling, but only after the batterer has gone through the batterer intervention program and the victim has had an opportunity to work through her own treatment programs and prepare for his return. So counseling is going to be required if there is going to be a reunification, and that process, by almost all belief systems, should be a slow process. It shouldn't be something that happens very quickly. And so, in work with batterers, much of the intervention focuses upon helping them recognizing their abuse, and much of the interventions whether it's in batterers intervention or otherwise, one of the things you're doing is helping the batterers to look at the underlying assumptions and beliefs about their relationships with women, and how that all connects into patriarchy and male socialization, and really how that underlies the abusive relationship that he has with his partner. But the kinds of controversies, there's a lot of controversies around the types of treatment that are used with batterers, and as we've mentioned earlier in the semester, there's really a split and disagreement between the mental health field and the feminist approach to working with batterers. So that the feminists really believe that the mental health intervention, mental health treatment of batterers undermines the need for the batterer to accept full responsibility for his behavior. And this has been covered earlier in the semester, so I don't need to go back through it again, but just suffice to say that there's a real disagreement among professionals in the field about the best approach to dealing with batterers. But at least in my part of the world, and professionally speaking, and I think this is pretty well accepted around the state, the state of the art in terms of working with batterers is batterers intervention. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of studies yet to show that batterers intervention programs are effective, and in fact, we'll get onto that in a minute, but there are different approaches to working with batterers. In the Duluth model, which is a psychoeducational approach and is the one that is probably the one that's most supported by the feminist advocates, kind of underlies the batterer intervention, or BIP as they call it, interventions, which again is really a re-education of the batterer. It's not therapy. It's a re-education that involves looking at basic assumptions about gender roles and the sense of entitlement and control, and the batterer's approach to other relationships, those kinds of things. But other kinds of models integrate. For instance, relapse prevention actually I believe kind of ties into batterer's intervention, so that it's very much like a substance abuse treatment, where the batterer identifies those situations that are high risk, and learns to identify things that might set him off, and begin to lead to his exploding, and again, and to divert that process, get him out of that cycle, and to find other ways to resolve the tension that builds up within him. And so relapse prevention is another model that's used. It is also a model that is used very controversially, but probably successfully with sex offenders, is the relapse prevention model, just like it is used in substance abuse treatment. Couples therapy, again, that's something that's very controversial, and most people that I know that are in this field say that is something that really comes very late in the treatment process, and only if both individuals, after extensive treatment, continue to want to save their relationship. Cognitive behavioral, anger management. Feminists would tell you that anger management doesn't really address the issue, because it isn't about anger. The battering isn't about anger. The battering is about male and female relationships and control and entitlement. And again, anger management is another one of those interventions that feminist thinkers would say really distracts from the real task at hand, the real job, and it really changes, it confuses the focus of what intervention needs to be placed upon. Alcohol and substance abuse treatment, drug treatment, is something that probably needs to be a part of many of these interventions. Drunkenness is one of those things, and substances sometimes can precipitate battering. And what you'll find is that especially alcohol, when it is connected to battering episodes, you're going to find that your batterer sort of uses the alcohol as an excuse for what happened. And one of the first responses that's very typical that I've seen over the years is that with both sex offenders and batterers is that when they're uncovered, when they're discovered, one of the first things they might do is admit themselves to a substance use program, and as though once they're sober they'll never do this again, and that simply isn't the case. Treatment of alcohol or drugs, as this slide says, it's a myth that the alcohol or drug abuse treatment alone would eliminate problems with domestic violence, and just like with sex offenders, perhaps the combination of the two, and particularly with batterers, the combination of substance abuse treatment and batterers intervention, domestic violence intervention programs, the two of them together are going to have the most success in terms of treatment. So you want to integrate those different kinds of programs at one time, but you're going to need to deal with the substance abuse issues with batterers, but that alone is not going to resolve the issue, and you shouldn't be confused or fooled into believing that it will. Sometimes psychotropic medications might be indicated if there is a form of psychopathology that underlies that underlies the battering, but that, again, I think is a fairly small, at least according to most people's thinking these days, it's a fairly small percentage of the population that have some sort of psychopathology associated with the battering. But the research in this field about treatment effectiveness is very confusing, and there's a number of different reasons for that that we really don't. This isn't a good opportunity to really go into that. This is probably more for a research course, but this is an area that really needs more study and attention to help us figure out what is the best way to intervene with batterers. Many of the studies that we have lead to inconclusive results about the effectiveness of a variety of batterer intervention programs, and I would say with a number of different programs, not just the BIP programs, but it says many experts doubt the quality and permanence of behavioral changes made by abusers as a result of this counseling. And when you get into cognitive behavioral stuff, working with offenders, batterers, whatever it is, I believe there's a possibility that you may teach the batterer or the offender what to say and what not to say in the process of reshaping their thinking. And it is possible that the offender, the batterer, particularly those that are more skilled, perhaps the antisocial type individuals will learn what to say and convince the therapist that they're making great progress with them when really the internal changes aren't occurring. And so it's important to not not only look at the superficial kinds of changes that are going on, but to really kind of do some digging with the individual and see what's going on inside as well as their thought process, and look for some signs and symptoms of maybe of old thinking continuing, because there's, and this is, I think, what they're talking about with the quality and permanence of behavioral changes. That will it stick? Is there things going on inside the batterer that is changing, or is it just a superficial kind of thing that the batterer is learning how to display the way he's supposed to act, rather than really changing the way he acts? And court-ordered batterer's intervention, again, there's studies that raise doubts about their effectiveness. So the authors believe that we really should be looking at developing a number of different programs. I think that batterer's intervention, if it is state-of-the-art at the present time, certainly isn't the end-all and be-all, and needs further development, and may someday be replaced by interventions that are more effective. And so this is, again, Bunny, part of the thing that you may be doing in the field is looking for better approaches. But my advice to you is in the meantime, is find out what the trends are in the community and what the accepted state of the art is. And while if you're a practitioner at least, stick with the things that seem to be working the best and that are most accepted in your community, because you're going to have a certain level of responsibility for what happens with the abusers when they're in treatment with you. And if they return to abusing and you're working with them, there's a possibility of you being held liable professionally if you're not following accepted practice. And so that's why I'm saying, even when you do follow accepted practice, there's a possibility of being held liable. But certainly it's higher if you aren't following the sort of what's accepted to be the appropriate approach to treatment. So stick with the things that are most accepted, I would say. And if you want to do some research and try out some other types of approach, you need to do that very carefully, and perhaps that's better done in a research kind of setting rather than in a practice setting. There are all sorts of challenges in treatment evaluation. There's a lot of deficiencies in methodologies with these studies. But there are a few things that are coming out that I think probably is sort of a backdoor way of supporting batterer's intervention, I believe, or treatment of some sort. For instance, that some of the studies have shown that there's a relationship between the dropout rate of abusers and violent recidivism. When abusers drop out of treatment, there's a correlation with a high violent recidivism rate, and so there is some indication that being in treatment has some impact upon reducing violent behaviors. Program completion reduced the probability of reassault during a 15-month follow-up by a third of the full sample and almost half of the people that were court-ordered. So men that have gone through these treatment programs and batterer's intervention, I think this is what it was talking about, a third to a half of them seem to have have found that the reassault rates have been reduced over 15 months. Now these are people who have completed treatment. And part of the problem that you encounter with batterers is just they don't stay in treatment. The treatment itself, the intervention, focuses upon some basic changes that are very difficult that the batterer may not want to confront. And so, if he is there on a voluntary basis and without some agency or court requiring his presence, and without there being some penalty for not completing the treatment program, the likelihood is the batterer will drop out. It's a rare batterer, just like with sex offenders, a rare offender, a rare abuser that will follow through with his treatment unless there's a court order behind it, and with the consequence then to follow that the court has to hold that batterer accountable if he drops out of treatment, put him back in jail. And so the completion rate in batterer's intervention programs may be relatively low because of those dynamics. The recidivism rate among those who have completed the program is lower than among the larger population. So again, some suggestion that there's some impact of this approach. Um, some of the things that when you look at behavioral kinds of things that are going on, and this is one of the reasons why the individuals who are doing the treatment with batterers need to do safety checks with the victims to see what other kinds of behaviors are going on, and maybe talk to the probation officer. Well, not maybe, talk to the probation officer with the batterer at the same time, so that you know not only what the batterer is saying in treatment with you and what he's showing in his sessions with you, but also you know what the batterer is doing when he leaves. You're talking to his partner, you're talking to his probation officer, maybe you have releases to talk with other significant people in his life. So some of the things that predict a higher likelihood of reassaults include things like stalking behavior, if he was emotionally abusive of his partner previously, as well as physically abusive. Being in a minority tends to predict more reassaults, according to most studies. Using drugs, and I would include alcohol in this. Not if there's a behavior where he doesn't comply with court warrants, that court orders and things, that's a poor predictor, an indication probably to be more likelihood of reassault. And as the book points out, the battered women themselves, the partner, oftentimes can predict whether or not a reassault will occur. Now, you can't always count on that, but those kinds of things really correlate pretty well with the reassaults. There's a table in this chapter that's worth looking at. And so we have to look for ways to prevent male violence, and there's a list of a number of different things, both in terms of individual interventions as well as larger societal changes to look at, including, developing treatments that are based upon evidence, from good research that they've been successful, public awareness campaigns, educational programs, changes in male socializations, and that really is poorly worded. It should say male socialization patterns. Again, what do we tell our boys about what makes a man? And looking at how we as parents sometimes, but also society, the peer group, institutions in society reinforce the notion that a real man is very sexual and doesn't take any crap off of anybody, and will stand up and if necessary be violent in order to take care of things. Those socialization patterns are endemic to traditional male socialization in Western culture, and it's something we have to change if we're going to end the problem of family violence. So training and treatment personnel, police procedures, those kinds of things also are things that really can, as policy and practice things in the years ahead, can address this issue better. And it says that, if there's some question about batterers receiving treatment, if they're still at risk for recidivism, we should recognize that according to some studies that 98% of the people who are battering out there aren't receiving any treatment at all, may not even be recognized by the legal system yet. So if there's no treatment, there's certainly even higher risk still. So even if we're not convinced that this treatment is as effective as it could be, getting some treatment is better than nothing at all. A couple of slides in this section about female to male IPV perpetrators, the female perpetrators, and treating the female batterers is a different kind of thing than treating male batterers, and there is as the text refers to, a gender distinctiveness, that the motivations, the things that set up and cause battering, are different for female batterers, true female batterers, than they are for male batterers, and we have to understand what those motivations are, and that we talked about that some weeks back when we looked at female batterers, what the consequences are, the different kinds of contexts in which that battering occurs, and something that is important to keep in mind is that oftentimes, not always, but usually perhaps, women's violence is almost always perpetrated within the context of male partner violence. In other words, as a response to that, sometimes it may be to provoke violence, to divert the perpetrator, the batterer, from children, or it may be to provoke it when I've heard about this, that sometimes women know the cycle. and know that when the tension building phase is going on, that an explosion is coming next. And so sometimes women will do things that they know will prompt the violence, and this could be violent behavior on their own part, so that when he explodes, the explosion isn't as great as it's going to be if it happened 3 days later, when it's built up even more. But more often than not, women's violence and the arrests of women, always look at these situations and see what happened first, and oftentimes you're going to find out that it started with the male and that she was fighting back. So IPV prevention programs for women has to address their victimization as well as their perpetration. You can't just look at the perpetration alone with this. And when you are providing interventions, some of the things that they suggest, is to improve their interpersonal coping skills and conflict management skills, and getting a better grip on regulating their emotions and behavior. That, I think, connects more to the more or less the true female batterer, let's say. While we're screening for male to female violence, we need to look at female to male intimate partner violence and screen for those as well. Women's violence should be understood within the context, again, of what they occur. If we're to be effective, we have to look at what was going on and what explains this. This isn't about gender roles, and it isn't about entitlement and control, generally speaking, as it is with males. It's a whole different thing going on with women. All sorts of other kinds of things to look at in terms of treating those clients. And so in the end, it's important that women learn nonviolent responses even to male assaultive behavior, is what some people think, at least, because there's really no excuse for domestic violence, no excuse for abuse. And so that is the conclusion of the second part of this week's lecture. And if you go ahead and click on to the next section in the class, you'll find the last part of this week's lecture material. Thanks.